Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
And it is our pleasure to welcome to the show now Steve Levy, who hosts ESPN's hockey coverage. Watching him on ESPN, talking about all kinds of things for years, but always been right there alongside John Buccigross and their team for the hockey coverage. And Leaves, what a day for Alex Ovechkin this weekend, man. And like, to me, there's kind of two athletes that have always sat in a different tier in sports. And as a guy who also calls football games on the weekends in the fall, I feel like you'll either sign off on this or tell me I'm missing someone. But Jerry Rice and his records, the receiving records, anytime you get close to one of those, like, you've done something pretty spectacular. And same thing with any record of Wayne Gretzky's. So how do you try to put into context what Alex Ovechkin has done here, breaking one of the all-time records that Gretzky had?
Yeah, I'm not sure there is context. I mean, it's phenomenal what he did. Listen, I'm a tinge saddened, quite frankly, that it's over. I imagine there'll be, even some letdown in the Capitals room. And that's something for Coach Carberry to try to figure out, make sure they're still ready to go in these final few regular season games. Look, we knew it was going to come. Once Ovi started ripping off goals at this clip, you knew it was going to come. And but now that it's over, tinge of sadness. There was so much excitement. It was so good for hockey overall, and especially for the Capitals and Ovechkin. Gretzky retired with 61 different NHL records, and I think he's down to 59. So he's still going to be okay. Because Crosby's out of the 20 seasons of at least a point per game, which is also remarkable in its own right. And now Ovi with the goals. It's great for the game. I'm so happy for Ovechkin. And it looks like Alex is having such a good time with it, as are his teammates. And man, if they could ever finish off this season with a Stanley Cup too, well, then it's an all-time season, probably that no one's ever had.
For sure. And I want to talk about basically all of that with you here over the next few minutes. Yep. But the idea that he did this so quickly is something that is not lost on me. I was kind of revving up for this record watch here, and then all of a sudden it's over. The tear he's been on, it sounds crazy for a guy that's now scored literally more goals than anyone else and the prolific nature that he has had in his career. But I don't know, the last week and a half, 2 weeks here, Steve, is this as good as he's ever been?
I mean, I'm with you. The guy's on fire. He's on a hot streak. And again, when you score this many goals, you think your entire career you're on a hot streak. And that's simply not the case. I think Wayne Gretzky did not score a goal in his final 8 games. So it's interesting down the stretch. And then they wound up playing the same amount of games, the same record to set the goal record. So it's phenomenal what he has done. And I'll be honest with you, as I always am, I didn't think he was going to get it this season. PK all along said he would. I think Mess was in my camp, and Messier's point was, and I thought it was a fair one, is that he was trying to get this record in critical, hard games against good teams while fighting for, first place in the division, fighting for first place overall in the conference, fighting really for first place overall in the league, so you can get home ice in the Stanley Cup final potentially even. So in these critical games where these games are important in the standings, usually those are, 2-1, 3-2 games. You're not playing many, 5-2, 5-3 games where goals are, being scored left and right. So the fact that Ovi does it, what do they have, 6 games left still or something like that?
Yeah.
5 games, whatever it is?
Yeah, 5.
I mean, that's remarkable, the tear that he was on. And, part of me, the league was looking forward, I think, to carrying the momentum through the offseason. I'm sure it was already opening night scheduled next season in Pittsburgh or something like that, or against the Penguins in D.C. But it's a beautiful thing. It's been, just think of the run that hockey, the sport, is on, from the 4 nations and everything, that all the momentum there, the exciting trade deadline, now the Ovechkin chase. It's just been great. It's going to set up for an awesome postseason too.
ESPN Steve Levy with us here on the Hoffman Show, talking about Ovechkin's record that he set this weekend, breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal record, now 895 for Ovechkin, and every single one of them, Steve, in a Capitals sweater. This is a sport where, we've had a couple of stars that certainly do this, of the Mount Rushmore types, but you also have a guy like Gretzky who wore a bunch of different shirts in his career. In some ways, I feel weird sitting here in DC asking you this, but as a historian of the sport, as someone who loves it and someone who loves sports in general and knows what they mean to fans, like, how do you try to contextualize or say what it means to have this all happen on one team?
Even more rare, right? In an era where, in a lifetime where athletes almost never get to call their shot, in terms of you almost never get to go out on your own terms. And I think part of a lot of athletes' own terms would be staying with one team. And, you mentioned, Gretzky, certainly the Oilers, obviously, and he might have saved the National Hockey League with the move to Los Angeles and all the attention that brought to traditional warm weather places in the U.S. and, all these other new markets popping up. So that was critical. But then he did bounce around. People forget he was a St. Louis Blue in one of those terrible Blues sweaters, for a year and a half or whatever. And obviously finishing up with the Rangers in New York next to Messier. So to do it in one sweater is awesome. I'm reminded of, like Steve Yzerman, obviously Sidney Crosby, and I'm not sure Crosby finishes in the Penguin sweater. I'm really not sure of that. There's a lot of talk. He could go, maybe he goes to, winds up in Colorado with his buddy McKinnon, and they try to win a cup together one more time. Raymond Bourque all those years in Boston, finishes up in Colorado. Like these guys look weird in other teams' sweaters, and fortunately for the district and Alex and the Capitals, and he's only been in that one sweater. It'd be really great for him, obviously, to finish out only wearing one uniform. But that's a real rarity in sports. Regardless of how great a player you are, you almost never get to call your shot that way, and it seems like everything aligns for Ovi to be one of the exceptions there too.
Steve Levy with us here for another few minutes on the Hoffman Show. You mentioned earlier, Steve, this is happening amidst a playoff race. This is the best team or one of the best teams in the league, certainly right there atop the Eastern Conference. And there is of course, what does it mean for that part of it? But we've talked about that a little bit already. So I'll just ask you about the team. How surprised are you that Spencer Carberry has this team at this spot? And why do you think they've been so successful against expectations this year?
Listen, I am shocked. I am beyond surprised, and anybody who tells you they saw this coming is absolutely lying to you, okay? In fact, I think a lot of people have the Capitals not even making the playoffs. That's where I'm at. And, remember, they snuck in last year, got the last spot, swept away by the Rangers. But you get guys who have career years. Carberry's doing a great job. We have a big love affair in the studio with Spencer Carberry and everything he's done. What they've been able to get out of Pierre-Luc Dubois is really commendable. The acquisition of some players, Chikrin the year he's having two quality goaltenders, signing them up. And by the way, I think Ryan Leonard's going to be a stud in the league. So, I think the good times are ahead. The Caps are now the envy of really all the other teams that were in a down period and a rebuild for a few seasons, right? Buffalo and Detroit. Now, Ottawa a little less this year and Montreal a little less because it looks like they're going to make the playoffs. And obviously, Washington could wind up against Montreal in the first round. But, you don't want to do a total rebuild, total breakdown. But the Capitals have done it the right way. And kudos to their management as well. Washington is the feel-good story of the NHL, and that was before Ovi got the record, and now they're on top. But again, if they could, cap this with a run to the Stanley Cup, man, are you kidding me? This would be all-time. I don't care what sport you want to talk about. It would be, a Disney movie.
Yeah, company man right there, Steve Levy. Make sure it's a Disney movie, everybody. Yeah. I'll make sure that the bosses see that one, Steve. Let's wrap up with that thought. Can they complete the Disney movie? Essentially, is the question. What kind of chance do you give this team in the playoffs, and how much does we've seen these teams that feel for blessed, preordained, whatever version of that you want to say. We've seen these teams before that feel like it's their destiny to win, and with what Ovechkin just did, it feels like this team certainly could qualify for that, but they're they're also, as we said, they're one of the best teams in the league, just period, and have been all year. So what kind of chance do you give them to finish off the script here?
So I think they're going to be close. I mean, I think the East is wide open, and I see Washington absolutely being the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. Washington, to me, they're thick, they're heavy, they're physical, they're hard. They've got the goaltending. They've got the lead defensemen, offensive players. They've got some shutdown guys. They're getting career years out of players. You know, Tom Wilson can play on any team that I'm ever a part of for sure. What they're getting out of Protas now, Strome reaching his potential. I know Protas is hurt, but hopefully he's get back to the playoffs. Alex has turned into an unbelievable captain now, too. I think it's the leadership. And probably we don't see a lot of that because it's away from the rink. But I get the sense of the job he's doing. I mean, the East, to me, though, is much weaker. I would be shocked if a Western Conference team doesn't win the Stanley Cup. But you know what? The Western Conference playoffs are going to be such a battle. Whoever comes out of the West will be so beaten up and abused, I think. Maybe that gives the Eastern Conference team an advantage. But in a wide open East, you have to give the Capitals the edge. I mean, Jack Hughes going down in New Jersey, I would have really liked the Devils. I can't sign off on the Maple Leafs. Anthony Stolarz looks like he's going to be their goalie. Totally unproven in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think the Caps are the team to beat in the East. And then it's a question of can they knock off the Goliath of the Western Conference, whoever that might be of the 6 teams or so that could come out of the West. But what it does, it sets up a great 2 more months of hockey in D.C., and that's good for everybody.
No doubt about it. Here's to hoping that we see you and the crew here for a Stanley Cup final, and then we'll let the Caps take care of the rest. Steve, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing this, and thanks for sharing your perspective on what Ovechkin's done over here. Not only the last, I guess not the last 2 weeks, the last 20 years in D.C. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, looking forward to another celebration of the fountain. Nobody celebrates like Alex the Caps. So thanks for having me on.
I was on the air that day and was monitoring the internet, and I go, I don't know how to do this on the radio, but Ovi's in the fountains at Georgetown if anyone wants to go. So I'm all for that. Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.